Liverpool have one problem, and it's named Arne Slot. Hi, I'm Wayne, and welcome to Goals by the Numbers. Let's just get straight into it. So, another weekend of matches in the Premier League, and guess what? Liverpool have lost 2-1 to Brighton, away from home. Now, let's be fair. Brighton are a tricky team, and of the last few seasons, they've given Manchester United, because I'm a Man United fan, enough trouble. So I get that. But what is significant about this defeat is this is the 10th time Liverpool have lost in the Premier League in 10 years. So if I'm right, that actually precedes the whole Jurgen Klopp era. And I think we're also getting to the stage where it's a case of we have to actually discuss and think about why Slot is still in the job. Now, of course, you may think to yourself, what do you know? Which is always a fair question, because just a talking head on the internet. But from my perspective, as a fan of a rival club, I'd like to consider us still a rival club when we've been really paltry for the last few years. Liverpool, in my mind, as a Manchester United fan, are a big club, a serious club, a club with a long history of trophies, great football, quote unquote glory. In fact, when I grew up, Liverpool were the dominant team. And I'm old enough to remember where Arsenal to win the league had to go to Anfield, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he scored 2 goals, and that helped Arsenal win the league in like 89 or 90. So, back in those days, Liverpool was a big, big, big deal. And, the club reinvented itself, got Klopp in, will really, really embrace data, which is also a good thing for the channel because we look at them as a really good example. And had Klopp in, followed his vision, won titles, were a serious competitive team. As Klopp left, he left significant players in the squad. Slot came in. From my perspective, just continued on what Klopp did and won the league. So again, we look at data on this channel. So yes, Slot has a Premier League title, but so does Claudio Ranieri. And we wouldn't consider him to be one of the greatest managers in the Premier League or globally otherwise anyway. But we're at the stage where I have to ask the question, is he the right man for the job? Because on one hand, I could say, keep him forever. If this is what it's going to be like, where Liverpool are just really hit and miss and seem to go from one extreme to the other, they've got what I like to call, well, being quite mean, the Chuckle Brothers at the back. They had the Salah problem, where from what I could see, Slot just ran and hid, didn't really stamp any kind of authority and be like, you may be a legend, but you're not doing that here. It was like, okay, yeah, sure, folded like a deck chair. I don't know, it's just, I'm curious. Xabi Alonso left or was fired the Real Madrid job. Would he come in the summer? Are Liverpool going to look at it and say, well, you won the league last season, so that means you should get more time to fix this, at least another run at it? But my perspective is I would rather all of the teams in the Premier League be as good as they possibly could be. Simply because what used to give me joy as a Man United fan when they were actually good would be beating a team who were good, because it was like, this is an achievement. It feels like we've worked for something and achieved something. So something I can always remember is the treble season where Manchester United and Arsenal seemingly were going for 2 trebles or treble each. And then we had the match at Villa Park, the FA Cup match, where the first one was a draw, and then they had the replay where Giggs ran down the left and scored a goal. Now, if Arsenal were Arsenal in the latter Wenger era, where they got beaten 8-2, when United played 8 defenders, yeah, it's good to beat them, but beating an Arsenal team who aren't the best they could be, it doesn't really have the same ring to it, right? So again, from my point of view, yes, I want Manchester United to do well, but I would like Manchester United to beat a Liverpool team who are the best they could be and really good, because it means so much more. Like climbing Mount Everest as opposed to climbing the hill in an area where it's just hilly. It's not really the same. So right now, whereabouts are we? Liverpool have lost 10 matches. That is more than Manchester United and Arsenal combined. Yes, the same Manchester United who fired their manager whilst they were in fifth for varying reasons, but also came 15th last year. And yes, Arsenal on top of the league, so you would assume they wouldn't have lost that many games, but you can combine the defeats of two teams, one having changed their manager, and together they have less defeats. That doesn't really sound good. Then you have the fact that Liverpool's injury record seems to be ongoing. Players seem to be getting injured, coming back, and it seems to be a bit of a hamster wheel. And now I think it was Ekitike who got injured in the 7th minute from a Milner tackle, I believe. And he is their top scorer in the Premier League with 11 goals. Incidentally, one less now than Danny Welbeck, an ex-Man United and Arsenal player, who also wasn't called up to the England squad, which is quite interesting, as I'm pretty sure he scored the most goals of any English striker in the Premier League. Of course, Kane is something else, but he's playing abroad. So I digress. A high amount of defeats, the most amount of defeats in 10 years, but it actually gets worse from there. So Liverpool's title defence is mathematically over. Yes, we'd all look at it and say, at this point, they're not likely to win the league because they're too far back. But to be mathematically out of the title race is significant because in the Premier League era, and I had a look, and I believe this is correct. Three teams, at least three teams, were mathematically out of it at around this kind of stage. The Moyes Man United, there was 4 games to go actually. Let's say 5, be safe. There were 5 matches to go. They were mathematically out of it. They sacked him. Then Giggs came in. There was the Mourinho Chelsea, who I think won it the season before, and then just completely fell off. I think even at one point he was shocked at how bad it had got. So they were out of it mathematically pretty quickly. Then there were Leicester, who won the league and then tailed off in a bit of a Chelsea fashion. However, it's not really fair to. You can compare them because they both won the league, but the budget of Leicester, the stadium sized fan base, global reach, actual players they had, they can't be compared to the current Liverpool squad. The current Liverpool squad, who had £450 million worth of money spent, and yes, of course, they sold players, some money came in, but ignoring that, Liverpool spent, let's say, about £450 million to keep it nice and a rounded number. They've spent that money, yet they're only 3 points ahead of Everton, who they play in 2 matches' time. So something there has gone really, really wrong. And the only person I can point to is Slot. There have been matches where he seems to have made strange decisions, or just played selections which haven't made sense. Even it seems as if he had that one season where he just said, just do what Klopp, I assume, just do what Klopp would tell you to do. And as soon as he's been in the driving seat and tried to implement his own ideas, hasn't worked. Now, if I try to be fair as I can, being a Manchester United fan when speaking about a Liverpool manager, I would say that possibly the injuries have hindered their season. But I also remember when Slot came in and Erik ten Hag was going through a period of numerous players being injured. And he came out quite confident. He said how, we expect him to do this, we expect him to do that. I know how Man Utd are going to play. And he didn't say it was easy to beat them. But when the question was asked, was it easy to kind of get this? He was kind of like, yeah. So Ten Hag had to deal with this for a season. We had numerous players out. I remember Casemiro ending up in the back 4 at one point. I think he was a bit like, I don't want to be here. So if a club the size of Manchester United should be expected to deal with that, and if I'm honest, the injuries are tough, but you're a big club, you should be able to deal with this. Is this the point of having a starting 11, A squad, youth prospects, and all reserves? And yes, if the reserves aren't good enough, why are they still at the club? that doesn't make sense to hold on to assets you may possibly have to use whilst also thinking they're not good enough. So to apply intellectual consistency, if the expectation was that Manchester United would produce whilst going through an injury crisis, I don't see that Liverpool can now use it as an excuse. They spent a chunk of money. They're only 3 points ahead of Everton. They've had injuries. Everyone gets injuries, right? There is no team who has 0 injuries throughout the whole season. So I kind of have to swallow that one. So ultimately, I actually think this is going to come down to a question of ambition, and I don't really feel right actually suggesting or even thinking that Liverpool may not be an ambitious club. However, when looking at my own, I can actually see how it's possible a club with such a history could kind of lack ambition. However, to be fair, I think Manchester United are trying to do things on the cheap as opposed to actually lacking ambition, but let's keep it on point. Arne Slot, from my perspective, is not the answer. Liverpool need a new manager in the summer. As a non-Liverpool fan, I've seen on X, on just general social media, I think even the Liverpool fans are running out of patience. And I didn't think they ever thought a title defence would be this bad. And I get the fact that, Isaac got injured. Okay. But Ekitike is doing good. So it's not like there's not a source of goals who's there. And of course now he's injured, so it's going to get really interesting. So I guess at this point, if I was the board, I would say, look, Arne, this is not going to work going forward. 2 scenarios. Either one, we keep you, and your aim is to not qualify for Europe, because when, I assume, Xabi Alonso comes in, we don't want him in the Conference League, because winning that would be a title, but it's only going to get us into the Europa League, which is not really where we want to be. Or you need to at least get the Europa. Otherwise, this is going to be really bad. Just sack the guy. Get Gerrard in for the last 7 games and say to him, bring back the feel-good factor, make the fans feel good, and just attack. Just do something. And, Gerrard, he did what he did well in Scotland, right? Didn't he win the league? And I know he was at Villa, but, it's hard at Villa, right? Because you've got bigger fish in the same pond. Whereas in Scotland, you've got Rangers, where he was, and then Celtic. So you're only really competing against one team. And I know this season, I think his Hearts have done really well, and great. It's always interesting when another team comes into the mix. But if we go by the usual suspects, so maybe Gerrard at a bigger club can kind of get around certain things by just having personality, knowledge, insight into how the league works, and kind of just going from there. A bit of an oversimplification, but I guess kind of like Ancelotti. He has this reputation of being more of a man manager than like a tactician. I really think we downplay how smart of a tactical mind that man may have. I've seen his Milan side over the years play several different systems, so he can't just be turning up like a cheerleader and actually tactically be doing different things. It just wouldn't add up, right? So, what do we think? Should Liverpool persevere with Arne Slot for the next decade? Because personally, if this is how they're going to be, I would love that. Should Liverpool, I guess in my estimation, hold themselves at a higher standard and say, actually, this is ridiculous. We're going to fire you because at this stage, we're kind of flirting around Champions League, Europa League anyway, and just get someone in for the rest of the season and figure it out in the summer. Or third option, I also noticed having a look at the league, there's something like 6, 7, 8 points between Aston Villa and Brentford or Bournemouth in 12th or 13th. So whereas the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th were congested, as Manchester United have continued to get points, it's now 4th to 12th who've now become congested. So we could open a scenario where Liverpool and Chelsea end up getting it's so unlikely, well, both clubs just end up getting pulled down into God knows how far down the league. And yeah, that would be interesting, right? That would be interesting. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Wayne. I'll catch you in the next one.